Did you know that there's a staggering number of artists that struggle to get their measurements accurate? It's true. They're so caught up in the creative flow of what they're doing, they either forget or they don't pay attention or just simply don't even know how to measure accurately. And this is particularly critical if you're going to be doing realism. Welcome to the channel, and if you're a beginner looking to up your creative and drawing skills, you are in the right place. Today we're going to explore the sight size measuring technique. Now this method is taught in some of the best art academies in the world and is a fantastic way to introduce students to the whole method of measuring accurately, therefore bringing their artistic skills up to an entirely new level. So let's get started. This tutorial was taken from my brand new Patreon course called Fast Dramatic Charcoal Portraits. Okay, so now we're going to set up our board for our construct, and this is the scale that I'm working at. I've got a 2 by 3 foot board, and I've got 18 by 24 inch paper and an 8.5 by 11 inch reference image. What I need to do is make sure that everything is set up very straight and perpendicular. We don't just sort of slap the image down. So we need to make sure that everything is straight and everything is aligned up really, really well. And it has to do with the measuring technique that we're doing. So I'm going to take and put this piece aside, and I'm going to take my ruler. I've got my pencil, and I'm going to take a sheet of my sketch paper. Now I'm not going to need a whole sheet, so what I'm going to do is simply tear this in half, and I'm going to use a half sheet of paper. So all I did was score my paper and then just run that score along my ruler so it tear nice and clean. And now this is the scale that I'm working with. I don't want it really, really tight. I'm just giving myself a little extra room, and I'm going to work from there. So one of the things I want to do is to find out basically where I want this piece, where I want them to sit. It's about like that, I guess. Sort of close to each other and centered as possible. So I'm going to measure. So I want this to sit nice and straight, and I'm going to measure down. It looks like about 6 inches from the top of this particular piece. So 6 inches there. I'm measuring from the edge of the board, 6 inches. And I'm just going to make a line at the 6 inch mark. And that gives me a line that I can use as a reference to line things up nice and straight. Then I'm going to use my green painter's tape because I don't want anything too sticky, and I'm simply going to put my reference image in place. Then I'm just going to line up my paper here, nice and straight beside it. So now that we've got our paper set up side by side, what I need to do is create what's called an axis line. And that acts as a focal and anchored point in the image that never changes, that we do all of our measurements from. And when I've got a face like this, I like to use what I call the dominant eye. Now most faces are usually on some kind of a 3/4 angle, or they're slightly tilted, so there is actually one eye that's dominant, but this one's the eyes are pretty even, so I just have to choose an eye, and I'm going to choose the right hand side. I find myself leaning towards that. And I always choose the corner of the eye because it's a very, very fixed point pretty much in the middle of the face. I don't want to create that point hovering in the middle of the nose or the cheek or the forehead or anything like that. I want to find some point that's an absolute fixed point that's easy to recognize. And so I'm going to use the corner of this eye. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out from the edge of this paper over to the corner of the eye, and then I'm going to create a vertical line. So I'm going to go in there, and I can see that from the edge of the paper to that point is 4 5/8. So 4 5/8 there. Then I'm going to come down here where I can actually see the mark that I make. That's 4 5/8 there, and then probably up in her forehead 4 5/8. So I've got a little mark. And I'm going to double check this with pencil first before I make make a mark with my, I'm going to go up here on the board first, come through, and then down there on the board. There's a reason for that, because at some point you're going to take this off. And I'm making sure that it looks straight. It looks straight. So now I feel confident taking my Sharpie marker. If you do it with just a pencil, it's kind of hard to see. That's why I end up putting it on with a Sharpie marker as well. I just line everything up. There we go. So now I've got the line through the reference image as well. Then I've got to create a horizontal line. And so I've got to choose the corner. Now the corner of the eye, if I go straight from there, it's actually going to cut the eyeball in two, and I don't particularly care for that. So what I usually do is take the bottom lid of the eye, and of course on the bottom lid of every eye there's a bit of a double line. So I can either choose the point where it's right where the eyeball is, or I can choose the bottom of the lid. And I'm going to choose the bottom of the lid. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to measure from the top of the paper to that exact point. And it's actually 4 inches exactly and 1/16. So I'm going to go up here. While I've got my pencil here, because this is already lined up, I'm going to continue this line in pencil right across this piece of paper, because I know for a fact that it's lined up. I'm going to go back in with my Sharpie marker, but I'm not going to use the Sharpie marker on here. All I want is the darker line on the piece itself. So now I have my axis line through my reference piece. Now I need to replicate that over here. I've already got my horizontal line, so I'm going to see how far that is, about 5 inches or so. Because this is a bigger piece of paper, I can give it a little more, so I'll go to the edge of the paper. You'll notice I'm making my marks go beyond the lined paper. So there we have it. We have our reference image next to our own paper, and it's set up straight and perpendicular. Everything is nice and neat and clean. It's actually really important that you do that in order to get accurate measurements. And this is what allows us to then make a measurement and then transfer it over, and it'll be accurate. And now we're ready to start our construct. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to take our measuring tool like this, and we're going to hold it in our non-dominant hand. In other words, this is not the hand that I draw with. This is my drawing hand with my pencil in it. I'm right-handed. And so I'm using this free hand in order to hold my measuring stick. And I'm holding the measuring stick in my 3 middle fingers, like this. And I've left my forefinger free so that I can slide it up and down and establish my measurements. My pinky finger I can leave so that I can use it as a stabilizing anchor when I've got my measurements. So my hand isn't sort of, wandering around the page. And I'm going to use my fingernail as the marking point for when I make my measurements. This is really important. I've seen students just kind of put their finger there and they're not really sure how to do this, and they end up with very inaccurate measurements. So you want to make sure that you use your fingernail as the very accurate point in which to make your measurements. We start from our axis line here in the middle, and I put the tip of my measuring tool up at the very top of her head, and then I bring my finger right down to right there where the axis point is. And then I simply transfer that measurement over to my working surface, and then with my pencil I make a mark. And I make that mark a little dash in the direction that I want my line to go. I don't just leave a dot. I give myself a little indicator as to what's going to happen. So if it's going to be a vertical line, I make it vertical. If it's going to be horizontal, an angle, whatever the heck it is, I just put the line there so that I know where it is I want to be going when I begin to link all these things up. Let's take another one. Let's go to the width of her face here. So I put my tip over there, right where my axis point is, and I establish the boundary of where this shadow shape is. Same thing, do that, put my fingernail on my measuring tool, transfer this over, and then make a mark over there. And I continue to do this, for all of my boundaries and big shapes. When I want to establish an angle, let's say for instance here, the angle of her jaw. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my measuring stick. So what I do is I continue to hold it in my non-dominant hand. Only now I'm gripping like this and I'm using my thumb. Basically what's happening is that this is pulling, that's pushing, and it makes it very, very stable. It means it's not kind of this wobbly thing. So I'm holding it and I'm pushing it. And now it's very, very stiff and stable. And then I'm going to extend my arm out and I'm going to lock my elbow. And I can hold my elbow up with my free hand. And then I go in and I establish that angle. Once I've got that, I simply pivot my arm over to my paper and see where that angle is. I go in, make the mark, go back, double check, bring it over. If it's good, that's great. I've established this angle. If not, I have to make a slight little change. I make that change, check, go back over. And you will be amazed at how quickly your perceptual abilities can actually start to lock on to those angles very, very quickly. So I can do her cheek, go over to there. I can do the angle of her nose from there to there, the angle of this jaw, the angle of her hair, all these different angles. I can establish those, the angle of the neck, which isn't quite straight, all these sort of things. And I simply go from there to there and establish those lines, make the line, and that's how we get our angles. So to recap, the sight size measuring technique is a fantastic tool for any new artist to actually learn how to measure accurately and to bring their skills up to an entirely new level. We see the importance of setting up your board properly with your reference material, how to use your measuring tool properly, and also what to look for: alignments, angles, proportions, and shapes. These are the important things that you need to be aware of. And you need to also practice in order to master this skill. Remember, it's all about the connection of being able to accurately represent what you see. Not what you think you see, but actually what you see. This tutorial is part of a full course that I offer on my Patreon site called Fast Dramatic Charcoal Portraits. So if you'd like to develop the skills to draw beautiful and realistic portraits, you can. Simply go to the link provided at the end of this video and find out how. And now I'd like to hear from you. How have you struggled to get your measurements accurate in your own artwork? Feel free to leave your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more transformational art videos coming your way. Thanks very much for watching. I hope this tutorial helped. Happy drawing, and we'll see you in the next video.